Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. Dramatic pause. And today, I'm telling you guys the tale of the Enchanted Snake. This is going to wrap up my little run of snake stories for the Lunar New Year. I hope that you guys have enjoyed them so far. I actually really enjoy them, and I enjoy finding them, especially. And so I'm excited for this one to wrap it up. This is another one that I pulled out of Andrew Lang's fairy books. This is from the Green Fairy book, but it's actually a story by Giambattista Basile from his Pentamerone book. It's an Italian tale, and so I hope that you guys enjoy this one. It's gonna be fun. I have some thoughts. Wait till we get to the end. So in the way long ago, there was a poor woman whose name, she actually has a name. Shout out, props, kudos for a named woman. Her name was Sabatella, and she longed for a child. And she had a husband. Her husband was Colomateo, and she bugged him constantly for a child, you guys. She was on him, like, we gotta have a baby. It's time for us to make a baby. We're not getting any younger. Baby. And Colomateo was like, I hear you. I hear everything you're saying. We've been trying for quite a while. We're also very broke and poor. So maybe not the best equipped to handle having a child in this economy. And she was like, I don't care. Baby now. And he was like, cool. Except that we've been trying without any success. So, after many a night having the greatest time, failing at making a child, they eventually came to the conclusion that this was not to be. Although Sabatella could not give up this dream of having a baby, and she would while away every free moment she had pining for a baby. And this pained Colomateo so much that he was like, I gotta get this woman some kind of baby, any kind of baby. So while out trying to earn a little bit of money, a little bit of coin to bring home to his wife, he finds a little baby snake. And he's like, this is a baby. So he picks up the baby snake, wraps it up in a little tiny handkerchief, and brings it home to Sabatella, and he shows it to her, and he's like, hey, I found us a baby. Isn't this great? It's everything you wanted. And she's like, I didn't ask for a fucking snake. And he's like, well, you wanted a baby. I gave you a baby. You said, give me baby. Here's baby. And he passes off the baby snake to Sabatella, and he's like, be its mother. This is what you wanted, and this is what we can afford. And so she's like, okay, because her nerves are so fried and her heart is so, like, overflowing with the longing of wanting to have a child that she decides that she will, in fact, take this baby snake under her care and raise it as her own. And she does. She raises the heck out of this baby. Every single minute of the day, she's out there catching the mice so she can feed it to her little baby snake. And it's working. This snake gets bigger and bigger and bigger under her care. And eventually, over time, a couple of years pass, the snake is huge. Like, not anaconda size, but definitely like boa constrictor size. It's a big guy, okay? It's a big old snake. And it decides to, one day, out of the blue, turn to its father, Colomateo, and say, Father, I want to marry the princess. And Colomateo, who probably has not heard the snake speak one time in years, the fairy tale does not say that this snake started talking out of the gate or anything, jumps up and goes, okay. So he goes off to the castle to ask the king if the king will let his snake son marry the princess. And the king thinks that this is hilarious. And he's like, you have a snake for a son? And he's like, yes, sir, I actually do, in fact, have a snake that is not a pet. It is my son. And he would very much like to marry the princess. And the king thinks this is all in jest. He thinks this is a big joke. And so he's like, okay, yeah, totally. Your snake son can marry my perfectly normal human daughter if if your snake son can turn my palace into ivory, gold, and silver by noon tomorrow. And so Cola Mateo's like, oh, okay, that seems a little bit rude. You could have just said no. But he goes home and he ends up telling the snake, his son, that this is what the king wants. And so the snake is like, oh, is that all? Okay, yeah. Go out into the woods and bring back this herb, and then when you find it, go rub it on the castle walls. And Cola Mateo's like, I don't know why I have to do this. At which point his snake son reminds him that he does not have thumbs or hands or any sort of digits at all that actually would make this an easy task for him. And Cola Mateo gets up from his chair and he's like, you know what, you're right. You're right. I was wrong. That was stupid of me to say. And so he goes out into the woods to go find some herbs. The story does not say which herbs. I'm going to say that it was basil, because basil seems like a money herb to me, and I think it's right for this story. So Cola Mateo finds a handful of basil. He walks it up to the castle and he starts rubbing it all over the walls in the middle of the night, and none of the guards see him or think it's suspicious or strange that this man's out here just like molesting the walls with basil. But then he goes home and he tells his son, I did it. And when the sun comes up in the morning, the castle is in fact transformed exactly how the king wanted into ivory, gold, and silver. And it is a sight. It is a stunner. And so Cola Mateo goes the next morning to see what his handiwork wrought, is shocked to see that the castle has in fact been transformed. And he goes up to the king and he's like, well, you did say that my snake son could marry your daughter if he did it, and he did do it with my assistance, but it was done. And the king is like, oh, I thought you were kidding, so I was kidding. And now I'm in a situation where I gotta keep my word, except I'm the king. I'm the king. So I'm going to ask for some more stuff. So the king's like, okay, I did say your son could marry my daughter. Your snake son could marry my daughter. But only on the condition that he turns the walls of my garden into pure gold. The walls and the paths. The paths as well. They need to be pure gold. And so Mateo's like, okay, well, let me just go see what my snake son has up his non-sleeves, because he's a snake and doesn't have arms that sleeves would sit on. So he goes home and he tells the snake about it, and he's like, hey, the king wants you to turn the garden walls and paths, don't forget the paths, into pure gold. And so the snake is like, okay, father, go out into the city and pick up all the garbage that you see on the ground. Just all the garbage in the marketplace, any public place. Find the garbage, pick it up, and then throw it over the garden wall. Just throw it into the garden. And he's like, you want me to litter in the king's garden? And he's like, I absolutely do, father. If you could do this for me, I would be really grateful. And so Cola Mateo's like, okay, yeah, I guess I brought this on myself by bringing a baby snake home instead of just a baby to my wife. And Sabatella, who doesn't really come up in the story again, but I imagine is sitting there in her rocking chair doing her one sock knitting for her snake son, because he can only wear socks one at a time. And she's just nodding her head going, that's my baby. That's my baby boy. Get him anything he asks for, because now he's asking for things. So Cola Mateo does. He goes to the markets. He goes out to the public places in the town. He picks up all the trash. He throws it over the wall of the king's garden. In the morning, the king comes out to his garden, hoping that it's not gold, because he doesn't want to marry his daughter to a snake. But it is, in fact, all the walls are gold. And the paths. We didn't forget the paths. The paths are also gold. So Cola Mateo goes over there and he's like, hey, look at this. Everything you wanted. My son did it. Look at that. I feel like you should be rewarding me for making you infinitely more wealthy as time goes on. And the king's like, I can hear that. I am rich. And so he goes, I have one more thing that your son has to do. And then I'll let him marry my daughter. So Cola Mateo's like, all right, well, hit me with it, because at this point, I'm not surprised by anything. And the king tells him that he wants all the trees and all the fruit of those trees in his garden to be turned into precious stones. So not just the fruits, the trees themselves. Precious stones. And Cola Mateo's like, okay, wow, you want me to like quadruple your wealth? Okay, totally, yeah. All right, cool. So he goes home, he tells his snake son, and his snake son is like, oh, is that all? And he's like, yeah, that's all. He's only asking for the sun, moon, and stars, but yeah, that's all. And he's like, okay, go to the market, buy a couple fruits, and then plant the seeds of those fruits in the garden, in the king's garden. And he's like, you want me to spend what little money I have on fruits, and then just plant them in the king's garden like I'm the gardener? And the snake is like, yeah, I don't see the problem. And Sabatella's like, yeah, what's the problem? Give our baby boy anything he wants. And Cola Mateo's like, yeah, cool, I guess I just live to work. That's what I'm doing now. So Cola Mateo does that. He goes, he buys a couple of fruits, he eats them. Of course, he's not wasting fruit. It's hard to come by. And he plants the seeds in the king's garden. Turns out in the morning, the king's garden is entirely full of gemstone trees with their gemstone fruits. And Cola Mateo's like, all right, I think my son has done enough for you. I feel like he's done enough. I've done enough. Can he marry your daughter? And the king's like, well, there's nothing else to it. I have no choice. I gotta keep my promise. And Cola Mateo's like, you probably could have kept your promise 2 promises ago, but sure. Yeah, totally. So the king's like, all right, yeah, bring your snake son. We'll have a wedding immediately. So that's what happens. Cola Mateo goes back to their house. He gathers up Sabatella and his snake son, and he's like, come on, we're going to the castle. You're getting hitched. When they get there, the princess, you might be wondering, who is not named in this story, surprisingly, despite being one of the main characters. No, I'm lying. She has a name. I just realized. I wrote it here in little tiny letters because it's weird. It's Grinonia, which is a disservice. But her name is Grinonia. She's actually not super thrilled to marry a snake, surprisingly. In fact, she's a little less than thrilled. She tells her father, like, this is absurd. I can't marry a snake. You can't wed me to a snake. And her father's like, I made a promise, and he made me infinitely more wealthy. You're gonna marry the dang snake. And so, crying, sobbing tears, Grinonia is married to a snake. And, granted, when the snake shows up, you guys, somehow, along the way, they managed to show up in a gold carriage drawn by 6 white elephants. So, a little bit extravagant, a little bit of a question mark on where they came from. I don't know, but the snake shows up in a carriage drawn by elephants and then gets married to Grinonia, and, we get to the exciting part, the wedding night, where she's like, how's this gonna work? And the king's like, I don't know, I don't care, figure it out, that's your husband now. And draping her shoulders with her new snake husband, they push her into her bedroom and shut the door. Now, they don't just abandon her to be eaten by a snake or whatever weird snake shit's gonna happen behind this door. The king and the queen end up hanging outside the door and try to take turns peeking through the peephole because they're like, we gotta know what's going on here. We gotta figure this out. And behind the door, Grinonia manages to settle her snake husband down, and she's like, okay, I'm not sleeping with a snake. And her husband, the snake, goes, oh, don't worry, you don't have to. And he ends up unzipping his snake skin and stepping out as a beautiful man. Like, the most beautiful man that Grinonia has ever seen. And she's like, holy shit, jackpot. But as she's taking in this moment to, like, rove her eyes all over this man's form and being like, oh, I thought I was marrying a snake, but I am definitely marrying the most attractive man on the planet, her parents burst in because they're nosy and they were peeping at the peephole, remember? And they see the snake skin, they pick it up, they throw it into the fire because they're like, this is the way we're going to save our daughter from being with a snake by burning the snake skin. Incorrect, because the young man, our snake prince, is so upset that he ends up turning around, transforming into a dove, and flying away out the window. And the princess is absolutely bereft because the entire light of her life has gone out the window. And she's like, oh my god, I cannot believe you guys. Not only was this the most embarrassing thing to ever happen to me after being married to a snake, which was the previous most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me, but you guys just robbed me of my fine ass husband before I even got to touch him. So she can't be consoled. She is sobbing. She is like depressed. She's throwing herself on the ground. She's having a full-on fit because she just lost the love of her life that she didn't know was the love of her life until that moment in particular. And after her parents are like, okay, we're just going to let you cry this out, and then, we'll come back and maybe talk about it as a family. Communication's really important to us, even though we promised you a way to a snake prince without your consent or communication. They leave, and when they're gone, she gets up. And Grinonia, you guys, is not, she's not lazy by any means. She's not entitled by any means. I mean, she's a little entitled. She's wealthy and a princess. But she's not that bad. She gets up, and she's like, I'm gonna fix my own problems. She disguises herself as a peasant woman. She sneaks out of the castle, and she starts to head off in the direction that the bird flew off. The dove flew away, right? And she gets to the woods, and when she's out in the woods, she meets a fox. And this fox is like, hey, you traveling? And she's like, yeah, I am traveling. And the fox is like, I love to travel. I would love to go with you. And she's like, fantastic. So now she has a fox companion. And they're traveling, they're exchanging stories, they're having a good time. She's like, me and my fox buddy, we're on an adventure together. And she tells the fox her whole story, which is really, really short because she wasn't involved in any of the stuff that happened in the beginning. And the fox is like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. That's a cool story. We should definitely try to find your prince. And one day they decide to take a rest by a tree, and up in this tree are these two songbirds, and they're just singing away. They're singing their heart's content. And the fox goes, oh, do you know what they're talking about? And she goes, no, I have no idea. I don't speak bird, but I speak fox and maybe snake. And the fox goes, oh, well, they're just talking about how they saw this injured bird fly by, and how they know that this injured bird wasn't just an injured bird, but was actually a prince who had been cursed by an enchantress to be a snake for 7 years. And yeah, he's actually gone. He's gone back home because he was injured, and he's gone home to mope. And she's like, oh, well, that's a really interesting thing for these two birds to be gossiping about in the most beautiful way right above me. And he's like, yeah, actually they're saying that the prince is the son of the king of Voloni Grosso, and the only way to save this prince is to rub his wounds with the blood of the very birds that we're listening to. And it's a good thing that the birds don't speak human, or they would know that we're talking about murdering them. And she's like, oh, wait a minute, you mean the solution to all of my problems is the birds in the tree right now above me? And he's like, yeah, that's the solution. And so she's like, could you help me with that, maybe, Mr. Fox, my best friend? And he's like, oh, yeah, totally, no, we're such good friends, we've gotten to know each other so well, I would love nothing more than to help you with these birds. So the fox ends up catching the birds for the princess, and she's able to collect their blood in a little tiny vial that she remembered to pack because she's a very good preparer when she's escaping from her own palace. So she had a little tiny vial that she collects their blood in, and the fox is like, yeah, there you go, I'm so happy to help you out. Too bad it won't work without my blood as well. And she's like, oh, is that important? Your blood? And the fox is like, yeah, unfortunately it's kind of important, but we're such good friends. And she's like, yeah, we are good friends. I would never ever do that. Maybe I'll find another fox down the road whose blood I could maybe use. And the fox is like, yeah, totally. And she's like, you know what, we should go look together. We should stay together because we're best friends now. And the fox is like, yeah, definitely. I would love to keep traveling with you. I love to travel. And Grinonia goes, I know that about you. It's my favorite thing about you, how much you love to travel, particularly with me. And the fox is like, yeah, I do. I love to travel with you. So they continue to travel until they get to the end of the woods, and they get to the edge of the kingdom of Voloni Grosso. And when they get there, trigger warning, Grinonia picks up a stake and kills the fox with it. She beats him down and kills the fox. And then she collects his blood in the little tiny vial. The little tiny vial she was holding in her pocket. She murdered the entire fox for a couple of drops of his blood because it was already full of bird blood, you guys. She couldn't just ask him for like a pinprick with a needle or nothing. No, she murdered the fox. Her best friend, her new best friend that she had just made, who accompanied her on her entire journey through the woods. She killed him. And then she continues on to the palace like nothing happened. Like she didn't just murder this fox in cold blood. When she gets there, she tells the king, like, hey, I'm here to see the prince. I have a cure for what ails him. And the king is like, yeah, I would absolutely love if someone would cure my son, who then became a snake and is now a bird. I would love that. And so the king lets her go up there, and he's like, in fact, if you cure my snake slash bird slash human son, I will let you marry him. And she's like, great, fantastic, awesome. So they go up there to the room where the dove is sitting, looking a little bit bereft, a little bit sad, a little bit hopeless with its damaged up wing, and she rubs it all up with the blood, and he turns right back into a prince. And it's her gorgeous, super fine, super attractive prince again, except for now that he's cured, he throws himself into his bed and starts crying because he, you guys, is in love with somebody else. And so the king's like, hey, don't cry. You're going to marry this peasant woman. It's going to be great. And he's like, no, I can't marry her. I love someone completely. I've saw them for like 5 minutes. She's been my whole heart, my whole life. You don't even know all the things I did to get this woman. I love her so much and I'll never see her again. And the king's like, hey, no, listen, I made a promise and I keep my promise immediately, unlike other kings. You need to marry this peasant woman. And the snake prince slash bird is like, I can't. My heart belongs to another. I will never allow myself to be wed ever again except but to her. At this point, Gridonia's like, okay, not only is he beautiful, he's kind of an idiot. And I like myself a beautiful idiot. So she throws off her disguise of peasant woman, which apparently was very convincing. And she's like, hey, husband, it is me. Stop crying. I found you. I cured you. I love you. And at this point, the prince jumps up. He's so excited. He's like, that's her. That's the girl I love, Dad. And the king's like, yeah, I put that together. I understood everything that she was saying. And he throws himself at her. They have another wedding and another feast in the kingdom of Volone Grasso. And they live happily ever after. And I like to think, it's not said in the story, but I like to think that the Snake Prince went and got his elderly adopted parents and set them up for life. Because why wouldn't you? You can turn stuff into gold and diamonds and jewels and all sorts of things. So it feels like maybe you could have also helped your parents out at the end of the story. But that's the end. The prince and the princess live happily ever after. And I don't know if she ever goes back home. That's also not in the story. Also, though, she doesn't really need to go back home. Her parents are greedy and they don't respect boundaries. The end. And that's the entire story of the Enchanted Snake. As retold by Arthur Lang, but originally told by Giambattista Basile, who's also a very popular author who I've talked about before. And I wanted to share this story because it's delightful. It's a little bit goofy. I'm very sad for the fox. I feel like that was unnecessary and a little bit mean. Also because this story is the tale type I just talked about when we did The Snake Prince, which was the Indian fairy tale that I told you guys, which is the animal as bridegroom, which is actually my favorite ATU type. It's ATU type 425. That's Arns Thompson Uther type. It is the classification system for fairy tales and folklore that they use to sort of keep track of the themes and stuff like that. So you can look up the tale type and find other stories that are in this tale type. And other stories in this tale type would be things like Beauty and the Beast, Psyche and Eros, and the Snake Prince and the Enchanted Snake are all those kinds of stories. And I've actually told a couple more ATU type stories. The Three Rosemary Sprigs and East of the Sun, West of the Moon are all in that branch. And they're my favorite of the folklore types. So I love to share these stories. Every time I see an animal as bridegroom story pop up, I'm like, I gotta tell it right away. I love this story so much. I don't know why. I think it's just because I was a big fan of Beauty and the Beast, and it might have been semi-formative in my youth, but it is one of my favorite types. It's also one of my favorite fairy tale tropes in fiction books and stuff too. I like that too. But yeah, I don't have a lot of notes about this story. I couldn't find a lot of details about it outside of the fact that this was a story by Basile, who is a very popular author of fairy tales. He's done a couple versions of stories that you know really well, like Sleeping Beauty and those sorts of things in that wheelhouse of well-known fairy tales. So even if you aren't familiar with Basile, you are definitely familiar with Basile's work in some way, shape, or form, because it is very notable, very popular. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I had a lot of fun looking for snake stories and was surprised to find two that were in my favorite tale type. That was unexpected. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this story. I have a couple more stories to tell, and then we'll hit episode 100, and I'll have to do something special for that, I think. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be something. So yeah, that's going to be it for me for this one, you guys. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces, and I will catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, guys, happy crafting. Bye!